Hello. Looking here at this, which I bought, would have been about 4 or 5 years ago for 50 cents. It says new, but it wasn't new, and it isn't new. The Afghan Whigs. Black Love from 1996. Yes, 1996. You can see the case is cracked across the front. Excuse me. But it is the original. It's all an original because it's got that blacky thing down there. Someone just beeped the horn outside. The black. What do we call that part? Side thingy part. Whereas I've talked about this before, that you kind of notice a change. Probably around this time, around kind of mid to late 90s, where they started putting translucent or clear plastic, so that you could kind of see a part of the back inlay art, and sometimes they would also have the name written there, kind of another kind of design option. But yes, it's got the crack. Also, it's got this new sticker, so whoever bought it, I'm pretty sure, I don't have anything within reach to quickly look, but I'm pretty sure this has been purchased from I didn't purchase from Real Groovy. I got it from the Hospice secondhand charity shop in Alice Road, in the Wairau, what do you call that area? Wairau Valley? Sunny Nook? For 50 cents. But this was, I'm pretty sure that is a sticker they have on Real Groovy records or CDs. You don't see it nowadays, but they did have the same, with the same font and the same design, with the white-black background with the red saying second hand. I might be wrong on that, but it looks vaguely familiar, so that's why I'm thinking it's from there. And the thing is that if it was, this is the kind of thing that would have been sold at Real Grooves. Afghan Whigs were not a huge band ever, really anywhere. I doubt they sold more than 500,000 of their most successful album. I might be wrong on that. Maybe they did 1 million. Let's actually have a look. This one, I think Black Love, or maybe Gentleman, the one before this, was their biggest album. Probably is not even going to say how many they sold, which is usually a sign they didn't sell many, because if there's a certification for platinum or gold, they'll usually have that in the Wikipedia entry, but that's not here for either of those. And just looking at this, I can see it didn't really do anything in the charts either. I'll talk about that later. I'll just talk about the physical CD as I see it. Now you can see here, the back cover art, there's no track listing, which is always kind of annoying, because it's, you're so used to having the track listing on the back of the album, so you just kind of turn over, oops, shit, say, what's this? But in this case, it's not there, and it's not here either, which is another place where it sometimes is. It's on the disc, but that's not much use to you when it's in the player, is it? If you're going, oh, what's this? Track 4, what's the name of track 4? But it's spinning around at however many RPMs in your player, then you can't access that. So to find out the name of the song, you've got to go and pull out this thing, the booklet, and look. Oh, here it is. The disc itself, I was just listening to this over the previous weekend. Kind of listened through to it about 4 or 5 times because I was quite enjoying it. I enjoyed it more than I originally remembered, because I probably listened to this when it first came out, and I've heard a couple of songs off it back in the 90s. But as I was listening to it over the last few days, I was thinking, well, actually, this is better than I remembered. This is more enjoyable than I remembered. It plays good, is my point. It has no problems playing, and you can see here the disc. It's not perfect condition. I'm not sure if that's showing up. Is it showing up? You can kind of see there when the light hits it. There's see there, where my thumb is towards that direction. There's some scuffs and scratches, but it plays through fine. The front of it's quite grimy. Looks like it needs a wipe, doesn't it? I've been finding that my CD player is getting quite finicky or temperamental, as in whereas previously it would play the disc through no problems, even if it was a bit scratched and scuffed. I've noticed in the last kind of 6 months it's fussier. and it's picking up the scratches more on some albums if it's very, very badly damaged. This one here, I showed you, it played through fine, no problem. So that's a good sign. Like I said, nothing on the back cover, except the girl holding a lamp. And then the booklet is fine. Now you see here, as is often the case with CDs of this vintage, about 30 years old, is these kind of indentations that have happened over time from the little kind of half circle plastic things that are designed to keep the booklet in place so it doesn't slip out. What happens is that kind of rests against it for decades. Because this, looking at this booklet, it doesn't look like it's been opened that many times over the last 30 years. And so it kind of makes kind of like a permanent indentation and even a kind of like a line across here where it's been dragged across. I don't really care about that, personally, but some people do. Some people want perfection with their with everything about the album. But there's the band. The only person I know by name from the band is the front man, which I think is that guy there, Greg Dulli. I think that's how I pronounce his name. I think the other guys, during their peak, in the early to mid 90s, I think they kept a pretty stable lineup. But maybe they I'll talk about that as soon as well. But since then they've kind of gone through different players. Now in the actual booklet itself, we see each song is represented by a photograph, an artistic photograph. And they kind of somewhat relate. Crime Scene Part 1, and it's kind of like a crime scene. Very noir, isn't it? My Enemy, a cop holding a knife. Double Day, kind of a foggy-faced clock. Blame, ETC. It was kind of hard to represent blame, isn't it? It's like that joke in The Simpsons when they're doing Pictionary, Homer and Marge and Milhouse's Luann and Kirk Van Houten. Kirk is trying to draw. It's Pictionary, so he's trying to draw. His word is dignity, and how would you draw dignity? It's kind of a hard thing to represent pictorially. And so, yeah, that's the joke. And when time's up, Luann's like, "What's that?" It's dignity. And then they get a divorce, and Kirk writes and records, "Can I Borrow a Feeling?" And then has the cassette tape, and then Homer finds it and finds it particularly funny. Anyway, there we have Step Into the Light, and we have a topless woman, but we see her face. She is looking into the light. A light is shining onto her side. So is that what they're showing? I don't know. Going to Town. Honky's Ladder. I don't know if that's really anything. Who's honky? Honky is a word you don't really hear much nowadays. It was never really a word people used in New Zealand, but you'd hear it in like American movies and TV shows. Night by Candlelight, we have some candles. Bulletproof, we have some bullets and a gun. Summer Kiss, a kiss. Faded, a dead bird on kind of like a promenade of some kind, or a boardwalk. Well, it's not a boardwalk because it's not wood, but the actual album. So I often do this where I don't actually talk about the music as much. So it kind of falls into that weird area. And I've been thinking about this. I've talked about this a lot over the years of talking on this channel, and also just thinking to myself. And I guess one of the reasons why I think about it is because it's the age, particular years in which I was a teenager. And so maybe they resonate, or the music from that time resonates with me more. If I think about the kind of years from kind of, I guess after Kurt Cobain died is a good kind of line to draw of, from the early 90s, say from Nevermind, from 91, or you could even push it a little bit before that, 90, through the kind of explosion of grunge and all that, and the kind of explosion of alternative rock in general. And then 94, where grunge was kind of starting to ebb away. I don't want to say ebb away. Its peak had been reached, and it wasn't maybe as popular as it had been, and so by the time he died, it's a period point on the end of that era, and then you move into that kind of in between era, or a flux era between, let's say, like I said, mid 94, 95, through to about, I'd say, early 98. Maybe you could say late 97, but I think early 98 was still getting some of it. And it's kind of like a period where there was not one dominant particular style of rock music. And the record industry was kind of searching around for the next big thing, maybe the next Nirvana or whatever. And they were kind of throwing lots of shit at the wall and seeing what would stick. And so, it's kind of, there's not one distinct particular kind of things. Where lots of different kinds of bands. I kind of seen of like several different streams. There was this kind of stream that I guess Afghan Whigs were part of, and I should also say Afghan Whigs had been a band before this. I think they made their first album in like '88 or something. They kind of preceded. 88 was their first album, and I guess that was indie or some tiny little label, and then they signed with Sub Pop. You can see on this the Sub Pop. Where is it? Oh, there, the Sub Pop logo is on here, even though this was put out by Elektra. So Elektra they signed with, I think, for Gentleman, which came out in 93. Yes. But when Sub Pop, what's the word? When a band was signed away from Sub Pop, like Nirvana was, by a major label, usually part of the deal, I don't know if it was usually, but sometimes, certainly in the case of Nirvana, the deal was, okay, you pay us this money, we release this band from the contract, but part of it also you have to put our label's logo on your release. So when Nevermind was released by Geffen in 1991, it had the Sub Pop logo on the spine quite prominently. And it's kind of like free advertising for a independent label, isn't it? And I would guess it was the same thing here. There might be another reason, but I just assume that's why. Even though it's out on Elektra, which I think was owned by Warner Brothers at the time. I think it is now, at least. Anyway, it's not really important. But you see very little Sub Pop down here. So these guys have been around for a while. But certainly on this album, and you can see that by the kind of design concept and the kind of photography and the overall aesthetic that they use. And if you've ever seen the video for Honky's Ladder, which I think was the biggest single from this, that kind of has this thing I'm talking about in spades, a kind of dark, nocturnal, slightly sleazy feeling about it. And you see it present in a lot of the videos of this time. Bands like, what's another video there? Well, like, I know a good example, even though it's musically, it's maybe not in the same area. But when Metallica released Load in 1996, which is the same year as this, and the first single off Load was Until It Sleeps. And if you've seen the video for that, even though it's not the same as Honky's Ladder, it has a similar color palette and mood, kind of like this, like heavy on symbolism and sexual ambiguity and, like I said, a kind of dark, gritty, grimy sleaziness to it. And maybe if you weren't there at that time, you maybe not understand what I'm talking about. But it's kind of something maybe I'd even notice at the time either. But in retrospect, thinking about a lot of these bands, like when Bush released their second album, Razorblade Suitcase, which was also 1996, 30-year anniversary this year. That was it. I'm not sure what the first single was off that, but I know the song Swallow. They had a video for that. And I've never been the biggest Bush fan, and I've actually think I did a video on the CDs that I have. I have 3 of their albums, which I got secondhand. But that album has that feeling as well. And that video for the song Swallow, again, really captures that same aesthetic. It's like filmed at like a house party. And it kind of really reminds me of being a teenager at that time. Not that I was like super, going to parties every day or anything, but when you did, they had that kind of feeling. The culture had that feeling, or maybe youth culture or rock music culture. I don't know. It's hard to really explain this. When I think of other bands, like, Failure, musically more, Failure or Hum or Garbage. I think Garbage put out their debut album in 95, a year before this. Failure, they put out Fantastic Planet in 96, same year as this. Hum put out, what's the astronaut one? The one that had stars. That was 95. Cracker, another band. We know that song Low. If you watch the video for Low by Cracker, even though I think that's 93, so that's kind of a few years before this. And like I say, it's not an exact time thing, but that really captures it as well. And then there was the more, I guess, mainstream, like Foo Fighters. They put out their debut album in 95. Silverchair, they put out Frog Stomp in 95. Live, the band Live, they put out Throwing Copper in 94. No, it wasn't 94, 95. It was around there. No, it would have been 94, actually, 94. And then they put out Secret Psalmody in 97. And again, if you watch the videos, like Lakini's Juice, or I can't remember the name of the other, the one where he drinks the milk. Freak, isn't it called Freak? I think it's called Freak. Those videos really share a commonality in feeling and aesthetic that also some of the music share. I've named a lot of bands, and a lot of bands sound nothing like each other, and you say, well, there's no commonality there, but I really feel there was. And these guys Afghan Whigs were trying to kind of move beyond the post-grunge type label, I guess. I heard this relate. There was actually a funny review I read when I was listening to this last weekend. I read a funny review. What did it say? I'm trying to find it here. Here it is. So it says, N. Cohen of Stylist magazine reflected Dulli and the gang came up with the idea of making the first alt blaxploitation album, because it uses a lot of kind of soul. I think it was described here as progressive soul, whatever the fuck that means. Alternative rock, soul, progressive soul, grunge. So they say, he had the idea of making the first alt blaxploitation album. While interesting in concept, in execution, Black Love ended up being hookless grunge that happened to have bongos and a B3. One of the songs features bongos quite prominently. I think it's us. I'm trying to find the track listing. Is it Blame? I think it's either track 4 or 5, Blame or Step Into the Light, has this bongos throughout. B3 is a kind of organ, isn't it? What's a B3? Yeah, Hammond organ. So it uses organs throughout it as well. And they call it hookless grunge. I kind of understand that. But this wasn't necessarily on this album as well. I think they've always been quite a hookless band. If you listen to Gentleman, that's quite hookless, nowhere near as hooky as some of the bigger alternative rock bands of the early 90s. Not saying it's bad, but you can kind of see why they never broke through to major mainstream success. They were always kind of a level or two below their more successful contemporaries. In saying that, it's a good album, right? I especially like the opening song, Crime Seat Part 1. I especially like the single, Honky's Ladder, which is probably my favorite song on the album. It's got a real kind of, I guess the verses are kind of more catchy. There's kind of this syncopated, percussive, and the guitar tone used throughout it. The bass tone also used is quite familiar. Even if you listen to Gentleman, you hear that bass tone sound up. Who was their bassist? in this period. Personnel. The bassist was John Curley. So Rick McCollum on guitars, Paul Bucchiani on drums. And it was produced by Greg Dulli. And incidentally, Greg Dulli, we talked about the Foo Fighters debut album, Greg Dulli featured on the Foo Fighters debut album. He played guitar on the song, maybe one of my favorite songs on the album, Ecstatic. I've never actually, but I think I found that out about 5 years ago. I was watching something on YouTube where Dave Grohl was with the guy who helped him engineer that album, because Dave Grohl famously wrote and recorded and played all the instruments on that whole debut album by himself. And except Greg Dulli played one guitar part on Ecstatic. But he was talking to the guy who was working with him in the recording studio back in 1994, 95, whenever it was. And they mentioned Greg Dulli, and I was like, oh, okay. I never knew that. I would never have been able to pick it out. It's not as though the guitar sounds any different than the rest of the album. But yeah, it's so it's not anything like a blow away amazing, the album, but it's a good, solid album that really captures the feeling of that in-betweenish era between the kind of late to mid-90s. And I say that the era ended maybe with the ascendancy of nu metal. Korn released their debut album in 94, released Life is Peachy in 96, I think, 96 or 97, and then released Follow the Leader in 98. And I say Follow the Leader is kind of, for me, I see that as the beginning of the nu metal era. As though there were many nu metal era albums before that, that was the one that really pushed it into the mainstream with songs like Freak on a Leash and Got the Life, etc., and then everything that came after that. But before that period between grunge and nu metal, and not just those bands, there was also, I guess there was so many kind of different streams. There was also that kind of, I don't know how you really call it, that kind of sarcastic, slightly quirky, almost like bands like Weezer. Weezer released the Blue Album in 94 and then Pinkerton in 96. Ben Folds 5, I think they released the Whatever and Ever Amen in 96, maybe 97. Cake, Fashion Nugget, which I've done a video about, but that was 97. That song, Popular by Nada Surf, really captures that. The Presidents of the United States of America. So in those bands I just named there, I kind of see them as musically a separate thing, but within that kind of in-between era. There's a lot more. I guess I've kind of got my thoughts together more. That would be a good topic to focus on. Or maybe it's just, and like I said, because from the years of 94 to 98, it was when I was age 14, 13, age 13 to age 17. And, those are very, very, or for me, very important years in your life formatively, things that you consume and you're exposed to during those ages really have a big impact, lasting impact on you. And so maybe that's why I kind of have such an interest in that kind of, because I think a lot of people see that era as kind of a throwaway era or a bad era. A lot of bad music came out, because, like I said, the record industry was kind of searching. But I kind of, it interests me. And there's a lot, so many other bands I could mention. But anyway, I didn't actually really talk that much about Afghan Whigs. But I would give the album, when I'm doing ratings, it always feels pointless because, like I've said before, everything's relative. But I guess it's kind of like a solid album, a 7.5 out of 10 type album, maybe. It's a good album to find secondhand because it's the kind of thing you can, and now, in 2026 in New Zealand, it's the kind of thing you can only find by pure chance. Because if I wanted to buy this, I assume this album probably sold a couple of hundred a few hundred, several hundred copies in New Zealand back in the 90s at the most. Now, what does it say? Actually, it might say the chart position for New Zealand. Oh, it does. What do you know? It got to chart position 35 in New Zealand. And the thing is, in New Zealand, you don't have to sell a lot of albums to get quite high positioning and you know, platinum. Like, what was it? I think in New Zealand, for an album to go platinum, it only has to sell 15,000, I think. And to go gold, it's only 7,000. I might be wrong on that, but I'm almost certain. Oh, here, I'm looking at it right now. It's, yes, album 7,500, gold album, platinum 15,000. And things that go platinum are like, you know, huge albums. Like, I think I did a video recently, it said Dire Straits went like 10 times platinum with Brothers in Arms. It's one of the highest selling albums in New Zealand history. But this kind of thing, if it got to chart position 35 at its peak, it's only going to be a couple of hundred, several hundred albums. So therefore, they're not out and about. And to find one, it's pure chance, you know, and that's what it was. I was in a secondhand shop and it happened to be there. I was like, Afghan Whigs, I remember those guys. 50 cents. And that's kind of the beauty of secondhand CD buying in op shops, is that so much of what you get is just, you know, pure chance, diamonds in the rough that you wouldn't be able to find anywhere else, even if you wanted to. Because if I wanted to buy this album, I couldn't. There's no record shop that would buy it to sell this. You know, Real Groovy is always the one, you know, basically the last remaining shop that's going to have a decent stock of CDs. And there's no way in hell that this would be for sale in Real Groovy if I went there today. The only chance would be there if it's someone had sold their secondhand collection recently, and again, just on the off chance it happened to be sitting there. But that's, you know, that would be like a very small chance of that happening. So yeah, that's kind of the allure of looking at through secondhand shops. And it's just that nowadays it's getting harder and harder to find those kinds of diamonds in the rough, because there are people who just go through every day and just take anything of any kind of value whatsoever. And it's even more fortuitous and just kind of on a very, very lucky chance that you find something. But anyway, I've rambled for almost half an hour. We'll leave it there. See you later.